Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. I am your host, Dean Jones, and this is Season 8, Episode 3. I'm having a really great time as we go from summer to fall, getting to try different foods and anticipating a lot of the fall cooking I'm going to be doing. Where I live in Northern California in the greater Bay Area, it's still very hot. Right now outside it's like 110 degrees. But it can help me or diminish my love of fall. And in my mind, I'm still looking at fall leaves and soups and baking and everything like that. That's going to be coming up hopefully sooner than later, although probably admittedly much later. Uh, I do love the summertime, though. I get to do a lot of things. As I was mentioning in this episode, I was really inspired a lot this summer by salads and cooking. But from more than one of the guests that I've had on the program this summer, I've seen some really beautiful ways with salads and light cooking. I've had some just amazing inspirations that have made their way into my weekly cooking repertoire, and it's made it really simple, and it's taken advantage of a lot of the great produce that I have had chances to get a hold of. I think one thing that I love so much was like when something is simple and yet elegant, I just love it. And I was at a restaurant in the Bay Area here, Le Mole, and they just have this simple hors d'oeuvre. It's a composed kind of salad where they have slices of jicama, cucumber, and mango together on a plate with with a spice mixture that's tart. I believe it has sumac in it. Uh, anyway, Tajin, I think it's called. You can buy it in the supermarket grocery aisle in the usually in the vegetable section. It's a little red bottle, and it's just wonderful for fruit salads or fruit in general. But just that combined with just the colors of the mango, the colors of the jicama, and the color of the cucumber together on the plate, and then the contrast of the red powder, and then how fresh everything was. It's just really just brilliant to me, and I'm really loving to get a chance to talk to some of my guests because they have such great advice. Today on my podcast episode, I have Patty Morrell-Ruiz, who in March published the Essential Cuban Cookbook. You've probably seen her information before on her websites that she has, and in her writing. She's done a lot of writing for magazines. She's been on television. You're probably very familiar with her already, but she has a very popular website, the Mad Table, where she has a lot of her recipes on there. She also does a lot of in-person cooking demonstrations and a lot of online cooking demonstrations. The thing is, it's not really just about her, though. She really does care about introducing nutrition to kids and to people, and she likes sharing. She's all about the sharing. She's a very selfless person, and her work, in her communities and across the United States has just been legendary. I was very humbled to get a chance to spend time and talk with her. She was so gracious to give me her time because I know she's very busy, and I just really was very enamored of her. And she was so sharing in the episode too, talking about, you know, cooking and food photography and just sharing of her own life. I really just had a delightful and very, just very, I just felt very blessed to be able to talk to Patty. And I'm so glad she got to be on the show. I'd really encourage you to check out her book, The Essential Cuban Cookbook. It has some really great classic recipes. If you're not familiar with Cuban cuisine, and if you've not had a chance to eat it, this is a really good introduction and has really good, simple recipes that you can follow, getting things from your grocery store with no effort. I think you'll really like it. I think you'll find it's got some really, great stuff that you're going to want to keep in your repertoire as well. So check that out. We're going to have links on the episode bio where you can check that out and purchase that online. You can also get it from most major online book retailers and get it from a local bookstore. I always recommend. In San Francisco, we have some great bookstores here, none the least of which is Omnivore Books. I used to like to give a shout out for because they really just concentrate on cookbooks and food related books. So they're always open, so check them out as well. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and go to my interview with Patty Morrell-Ruiz, author of the long-lived blog, The Mad Table, and her cookbook, The Essential Cuban Cookbook Classic Recipes. Also links for her website on there where you could look up her cooking classes if you live in the Florida or the East Coast area. Here we go. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. Today, I'm talking to Chef Patty Morrell-Ruiz. Chef Patty is the creator of the Mad Table food blog. She is also a culinary instructor, private chef, recipe, menu design developer, and you can tell if you've read the Mad Table blog, a food stylist. The Essential Cuban Cookbook, 50 Classic Recipes, came out this year to much acclaim. Patty, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Dean. So happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you, and I'm quite honored too after reading the Mad Table, and I get the installments every week as well from you. It's a thrill to be able to talk to you. I'm very excited.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, before your culinary career, you were a home economics teacher that taught middle and high school students. Your curriculum included safety and sanitation, cooking techniques, basic nutrition, recipe development, and more. Tell us about this time and what excited you about teaching young people cooking techniques and recipe development.
Yes. So, Dean, I'm a very passion-driven person. So being able to share my passion for food with my students gave me so much joy, not only because I exposed them to food, but also being able to see their faces, how proud they felt every time that they tried something new or that they learned something new. So a lot of children tend to be picky, and just there's something that happens when they are part of the process. They're more open and willing to try these new foods, new techniques. So seeing the pride in their faces gave me a lot of joy as well. It was one of my favorite parts of the job.
If you don't mind, I'd like to digress about this because I find this to be very fascinating. I'm old enough to remember when most schools had home economics still. And I know that in California, at least, you don't see it as much. But I've seen a lot of food programs develop. I recently interviewed somebody who has Charlie Cart, which goes into food deserts and underdeveloped communities in America and helps introduce the kids to cooking and growing food and preparing fresh food. And I know that many other people I've had on the program do that as well. I feel like many kids nowadays just grow up with processed food like chicken nuggets and cereal and things like that. And most kids wouldn't recognize it seems a vegetable if they saw it or fruit if they saw it. What have you experienced when you work with kids about that in that regard?
So actually, I run a culinary camp for kids only during the summer, and I host it out of home. I used to do it years ago out of my classroom, and then I moved it to my home about 10 years ago because I felt that it was a more personal experience. The kids could relate to me and to what we were learning much more. And it's true, they're used to, everyone lives a really fast life. They do a lot of drive-throughs for dinner. But when you expose the children to these different types of foods and fruits and vegetables, and they actually are part of the process, it's huge how well they respond to it. And that's probably what I enjoy the most out of my job, is seeing that and being able to share that with them. So in my camp, what we do is we cook meals, full-blown meals. They'll learn how to make chicken piccata or chicken marsala, or we make salmon. Everything is homemade, and they're all recipes that they can turn around and make at home. Simple recipes, nothing too crazy, but things that are doable so they can learn how to make a meal for their family if they wanted to. We make meatballs, we roast vegetables. Charred broccoli is probably one of the most popular vegetables that kids tell me, I don't like broccoli. And then they try charred broccoli with a little lemon juice and they fall in love.
That reminds me, because I feel like sometimes the most simple vegetable and fruit preparations are the best, but I think we look at vegetables and fruits as labor intensive, and I don't think that's really the case. I was in a restaurant yesterday, and I had an hors d'oeuvre that was just so simple. It was slices of jicama, mango, and cucumber. They were artfully displayed, and they were sprinkled with this spice called Cajun, which is kind of like a sumac, kind of a salty sour kind of spice, and it's put over that. And that was just so simple yet so well prepared. And I'm like, I feel like oftentimes, like the broccoli recipe you mentioned, it's so simple yet we kind of, most of us, like busy parents like me, we're eluded by that. We feel like, oh, just throw in the chicken nuggets, we'll get it done. Is that kind of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do get a lot of that. But, again, I don't try to teach them how to make a recipe that's going to take them hours, but
Yeah.
I try to keep it simple and just try to expose them to those fruits and vegetables and quick meals that are healthy, that taste good. And they're usually in awe. They're like, oh wow, and I made this and I like this. So that's really cool. It's cool to be part of it and to witness it. I enjoy that.
Nobody that reads your work will be surprised that you have formal culinary training. Tell us about that training.
Okay. So uh, going to culinary school was something that I always wanted to do, but due to my full-time teaching job and life in general, Dean, because being a mom and a wife was always my priority, and it just seemed like the timing wasn't right.
Yeah.
And then one fine day, I just said, I'm not gonna let life keep going by, and I just enrolled. I would teach full-time during the day, go to culinary school at night, and I have to tell you that not only was I obviously able to elevate my knowledge, but I made contacts along the way that helped me get where I am today. It's amazing how many people I've met. Every time I do an event, I feel like eventually it kind of gives back. Either I'm referred to someone or it just opens up a door. And besides, going to culinary school, getting that degree gave me the confidence to start my website, themadtable.com. And it gave me the confidence to showcase my work. So even though I had tons of years of experience as far as working with food, not in a restaurant level, but working with food with students and teaching, I always felt that I wasn't validated as a culinary professional. So going to culinary school gave me that push. And then once I started my website and posting on different social media platforms, that was huge as well, because it led to many jobs, not only as a private chef, but recipe development, food styling. I was featured in different media outlets. So Dean, I would say that going to culinary school was the best decision I ever made.
Now, as a private chef and culinary instructor, you have done numerous live food demonstrations in your private and group cooking classes and many in your local community. Can you tell us about these classes that you do?
Okay, so when I was going to culinary school, I met a chef that she was in charge of the South Florida home shows and the Coconut Grove Art Festival. Those are two large events here in South Florida. And I started helping her. And then eventually I started doing cooking demos with her. And I just fell in love with the ability to connect with people and how they really wanted to listen to what I was sharing. So I started doing demos. I started hosting enrichment classes out of my home. And usually they are themed cooking classes. And it was, I don't know, it gave me a lot of joy just teaching, I would say, kitchen confidence. A lot of the people that would come to my classes and that still do, they had never cooked before. They had lots of fear. So if someone chops an onion the wrong way, I try not to freak out and make it work. So, like I said, I don't want my clients to be terrified cooks. I want them to enjoy cooking. It really should be enjoyable and a lot of fun and rewarding. And that's what I try to just share with them. It's very casual. It's a lot of fun. We cook as a group. And I try to change my themes, whether it's homemade pasta or maybe like a Middle Eastern class or Italian, Cuban, Latin fusion, Spanish. We have different themes, but they're all interactive. And then the fun part is that once we're done cooking as a group, it turns into a dinner party. So you can bring your own bottle of wine. We move over to the table. So it's definitely a very casual atmosphere.
I wish I lived in Florida now.
Right? They're a lot of fun. I'm actually going to have one this Saturday. We're going to feature 4 recipes from my cookbook, and it's a cooking class / dinner party. And I think that's what everyone is looking for, something to do where they can learn something new and have fun at the same time.
That sounds like a good time. And as a married person, I do most of the cooking at home, but I think my wife would really love to do something like that with me. I really would like to do something like that. That sounds really great. So if you live in Florida, we're going to have links to that information in the bio.
Oh, wonderful.
You have been a guest chef at the James Beard House Foundation in New York City, which is wow, and have led a recipe and menu development project for Subway Corporation. Also,
Yeah.
wow. Both of these things are very impressive. Can you tell us about this work?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So James Beard, we'll start with James Beard. James Beard was having a dinner to promote Aegean cuisine. Mind you, I am not Greek. I have no connection to the Greek culture other than I'm fascinated with Greece, but they were flying down a celebrity chef by the name of Chef Argiro Barbarigo and her whole team directly from Greece. And they invited 6 different women throughout the country that were involved in La Dames Escoffier, and I was one of them. So obviously it was quite the honor. It was an experience of a lifetime that I will never forget. I don't know if you've ever been to the James Beard kitchen, but it is tiny. It's a tiny little kitchen, but just being there was just such a thrill. And working with a team of Greek chefs that were just busting out the Greek the whole time. And I was the only one that didn't understand. Because all the other Doms that were invited, they were from LA, some from New York, but they were all Greek American. So they spoke the language, and there I was, but I just fell in love with their culture. It was an experience, something that I will never forget. Developing a recipe for Subway was surreal. I developed 11 recipes for them. When I started my website, there was someone that followed me. She referred me to someone that worked for Subway, and that's how it started. They found me through my website, and I developed 11 recipes for them. I worked with the team for months. We worked really hard, and then the project was eventually canceled. So my recipes never made it to any of the restaurants, but I learned so much about recipe development. It was such an eye-opener. And another amazing experience.
Now, just by looking at the Mad Table, people can be wowed by the wonderful food styling that there is there. And you work as a food stylist. Some of your most popular food styling projects include Food Network, Bacardi Limited, Landmark Theater, among others. How did you get into this work, and what is a typical day like doing food styling?
Okay, so Dean, like everything I do, it always seems like it falls from the sky. Food styling started way back when I had a photographer that came to shoot the images for my website. And he told me that I had an eye for styling. So a few months later, he hired me for a photo shoot as a freelancer. And I've been working for him, and I want to say him and other local photographers for about 7 years now. It's completely different from cooking and teaching, because when you cook for the camera, the food doesn't even have to taste good, it took me a while to realize that it really doesn't have to taste good, which sounds so weird, but I get to use my culinary knowledge on how to manipulate food. So I enjoy that because I know about food. I know how long it'll last. So I work with that. And besides that part, I love being surrounded by other creatives. So that's always a lot of fun. Our typical days are very long, anywhere from 12 to 14 hours, but the energy that you feel when you're able to execute exactly what the client wants is unexplainable. I'll give you an example. The last shoot that we just recently worked on was for National Pork Board, and the videographer and the creative team sold the client on an idea that we had never done, and it was a burger drop. It took them forever to do this burger drop. I want to say we tried about 4 different times. It took about 2.5 hours of shooting time, but when it actually worked, like we just couldn't believe it that we were able to do that. So it's very rewarding to be able to please the client. You know, I am being a chef and pleasing people is in my DNA. So I think that just kind of pleasing the client is part of it. It was great.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. You do such lovely work, and I try and do photos of my food on Instagram. I've mentioned this before on the show, and I feel like everything is a vague shade of beige when I cook and post my stuff on Instagram. And your stuff is so lovely and vibrant and colorful and just very like it just pops. What are some of your secrets to doing kind of the food styling and the photography?
I really try to work with colorful foods. You know, I learned early on that brown foods, obviously, like shooting mushrooms sometimes can be a little challenging. And so I try to focus, and it goes hand in hand with my Latin fusion type of cooking, right? So I try to focus on very vibrant peppers and food that's very bright, and try to stay away from brown foods, even though I love them, but I try to stay away from shooting those.
That sounds good to me because I know because from experience, it's not a good way to go. It doesn't always look good on Instagram.
No, not at all. Besides, I work with some really good photographers, and I know one of them in the very beginning told I wanted to create like a curry recipe. And he said, you may want to think about it. And I said, why? He goes, because it doesn't always turn out the way you expect it to. And it's true, you know, like a lot of the meats, a lot of the porks, it just doesn't look very pretty on camera.
You now serve as secretary on the board of, and please pardon my French here, Les Dames d'Escoffier, South Florida chapter. I hope I got that right.
Yes, Les Dames Escoffier. Are you familiar with Les Dames at all?
I'm actually not. Until now, I've not heard of them.
Okay, so it's a global organization. It's a philanthropic organization that it supports young women that want to be in the culinary, hospitality, or wine industries. And we do this through grants, scholarships, and mentorship. So there's a lot of celebrity chefs that are DOMs. For example, Sarah Moulton.
Oh, wow.
Sarah Moulton is a DOM. I actually had the pleasure of having her visit my home. She featured me in one of her episodes. We got to cook in my backyard. That was a lot of fun. Carla Hall is
wow.
Yeah. So it's a great organization. We have events in our community, and then the part of the proceeds, we give out grants and scholarships to these young women. So it's amazing. It's a really good cause that we're doing.
This year, you published the Essential Cuban Cookbook, 50 Classic Recipes, that came out to much acclaim. If you just go through the Amazon reviews alone, let alone the professional reviews, it's quite very well received. What inspired you to write it, and what has been the feeling of writing this first book for you?
Okay, Dean. So I always wanted to write a cookbook. I never thought it was going to be like exactly a Cuban cookbook. I wanted to do more of like a coffee book with family recipes. And this did turn out to be a family recipe, but I wanted to do it as a project with all my cousins and my siblings. And every time I approached them, everyone just kind of like, yeah, but no one ever did anything. So kind of the years went by. Nothing happened. And last year, a publisher approached me and asked me if I would write a Cuban cookbook. And obviously I said yes. And now that I wrote my first book, I'm ready for the next one.
You've had such classics in the book as black beans with rice and yellow rice with chicken and abandongas. What are the recipe development portion of writing the book like for you?
Okay, so most of these recipes are my family recipes from my grandmother, my mom, my dad. They all mean something to me. The recipe testing over and over and over was probably the biggest thing. You have to, it's not the same thing to cook for your family than to cook for the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, right.
And the other challenging part was, what if somebody in Boise, Idaho wants to make a recipe and can't find fresh culantro, which I grow wild in my backyard? So that was a little challenging. It wasn't too hard, but it was a little challenging to tweak the recipes so the ingredients were all accessible no matter where you live.
There's a really wonderful dessert chapter in here that had some great recipes for things like cream cheese flan, rice pudding, and cinnamon custard. Tell us about your writing this chapter and deliberating on what to include.
So this was the hardest part for me because I am not a dessert person. So, and I don't like to make desserts and I don't like to eat dessert. So this is definitely.
Wow. I would say, I think the opposite by reading this. I would think quite the opposite. You fooled everybody with that.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. And, you know, desserts tend to be most people's favorite. So I knew that I needed to include something with guava, which is my least favorite fruit. Flan, the flan recipe I had had for years. So that one wasn't very hard. So what I did was I outsourced to my like best friend and anyone that I knew that had good desserts under their belt. So I got to feature their recipes in that section. I included my mom's buñuelos, and that was really nice because it was a good memory that I was able to experience. And then my neighbor and my best friend, she makes an arroz con leche, which is like a rice pudding. It is a rice pudding, and she includes sweet condensed milk, evaporated milk, and she also uses a little heavy cream, and it is wonderful. And in my family, every time that she makes that dessert, like all my kids, my husband, they all like fight like animals over that. So being able to include her arroz con leche in my book was huge. Another family friend gave me her guava bread pudding recipe, and everyone loves that one. So what I did to her recipe is that I added a little cream cheese. So I gave it my spin and made it a guava cream cheese bread pudding. And that one's really good as well. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to be able to include the people that I love in this project.
It shows in the book too. And I just want to ask you about the drink section as well. You have a variety of hot drinks and also like adult beverages, I like to say. What inspired you to put that in the book, and like what was the testing of that like? What were you thinking when you wrote that as far as like how you wanted it perceived?
So that was an easy one because I love to entertain and make cocktails. So that one was a no-brainer. So I had to include the popular ones like the daiquiri, the mojito, the rum and coke, and el presidente, and then the Cuban eggnog also as well.
Yeah.
Because that one's very popular. We gifted a lot during the holidays. So I just thought it would be fun to include it in case no one had ever made it. And I think I also, you know, I can't remember, but I want to say that I also gave a tip. The Puerto Ricans make one called coquito. I don't know if you've ever tried that one. And
no.
What they do, it's very similar to the eggnog. So the Cubans make it with rum, and the Puerto Ricans make it with rum as well, but they add some cream of coconut to it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That just sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So I wanted to include that. I thought that would be really good. The mojito is also like one of our most popular ones. The daiquiri, I remember my grandfather making it when I was a little girl. So, and it's not like your typical strawberry daiquiri. This is more of like a frozen lemon slushy. So I did that. What else? Oh, El Presidente was very popular in Cuba, like in the 1920s, I want to say 1930s. And then it became popular in the United States right after the Prohibition era, because the Americans, when they would go visit Cuba, they brought back this recipe to the US, and then eventually it died out, but it was it had history. So I definitely wanted to include that drink in the book. So what I did was I think I needed to write 50 recipes. So I kind of broke everything down and included 5 dessert, 5 drinks, 5 beef, 5 chicken. I broke it down like that.
I want to ask you, who are some of your favorite food writers that you admire and that you really love to read their work?
Definitely, I have to start with Anthony Bourdain. I don't know who doesn't love his writing. Who are my favorites? Anthony Bourdain, Alice Waters, I love.
She's wonderful.
She is. She really is. You know who else I really love is J. Kenji Lopez Alt. Love him. Sam Sifton. You know, not only because I met Sarah Moulton, but when she was with Gourmet Magazine, I used to read a lot of her recipes and loved how easy she made it sound. She really is a great chef. Ottolenghi, love Middle Eastern food, love his books. There is a popular Instagram account. I don't know if you're familiar with Athena Calderon.
Yes.
She's a model. She's a great visual storyteller. I love to entertain, like I mentioned before. So she has a book, Cook Beautiful, and she shares a lot of design tips. So I love her as well. I want to include her because I really love her stuff.
I first was introduced to your work with the Mad Table food blog, and it's something that I always really love to get in my inbox every week when I get your newsletters. And it's like kind of like a online magazine in many ways. I think I would hate to represent it as just like a recipe website, because you include many recipes, but also talk about many things like entertaining, seasonal food. There's a lot there. So it's not just like, a simple recipe. It's quite a bit. And I think the magazine description really kind of represents it well, because there's a feast for the eye as well with your food styling, your wonderful photographs. Tell us about developing this, and when you created the Mad Table, what did you think would happen with it, and how have you felt about it over the years?
So Dean, it's, every day I learn something new. Every day I realize that, if I have to change and go on a different direction. So the Mad Table allows me to do that. It's not like I'm being judged. I'm able to connect with my audience. Everyone seems to be open to whichever direction I take. And I try to just be honest and stay, just give my audience, I try to give my audience whatever we're going through right now. So we're getting ready to go back to school. I try to focus on recipes that are geared for busy families that don't know what to do. The first few weeks of school are chaotic, right? There's all these meetings and activities. So I just try to keep it simple. I remember before the pandemic, I tried making all my recipes really, really chefy because I love that. It's what I do. And then during the pandemic, everyone would send me emails and they would say, can you just please share how to make a really easy chicken or meatballs, something really, really simple. So I started doing Instagram lives just randomly. I would just go on Instagram during the pandemic and I would make really simple things, Dean, like simple. When I say simple, I'm talking about burgers, meatloaf, mashed potatoes. And then my following grew because that's what everyone wanted. So that's the direction I try to take the Mad Table, my website. Easy recipes. Every once in a while, I'll throw something in there that's chefy, but it's my experience that people want relatable recipes and they want to know, and everybody wants to know what I'm doing. So that's what I share. I'll share, what I'm doing if I'm going on a trip, which at first was kind of weird. Like, who wants to know if I'm going on a trip or what did I eat on my trip? But that's what people want to know. So that's what I give them.
It's very true. We love hearing stuff like that from the people that we follow. And this is really kind of exciting to kind of find out what you're experiencing and what food you're eating. It's kind of fun.
It is. It is. It's a lot of fun.
So I want to ask you, Patty, what's next for you?
What's next? Well, let's see. I would love to host a Cuban show on a network.
I
What
kind
else?
of wondered about that. Like, I'm feeling like, why haven't they contacted you? If they've already talking to you, good, because they should be.
I don't think anybody knows I exist, Dean.
I'll get everybody that's listening to this, all the fans, all the mad tablers, please get that out there. Let's start sending those letters into the networks.
That's right. Okay, so what's next? I would love, I'm not working on on another book right now, but now that I wrote my first book, I know everything that I would want to maybe do a little different, or, I think that I'm ready to do another book. And this time around, I would love to include more table styling. I'd love to give my audience suggestions, all the readers out there, if they're going to make tacos. So, and you're entertaining, what cocktail should you serve? How should you set your table? Do you remember, oh my gosh, what was her name? Was it Sandra Lee that was in the Food Network years ago? Maybe something like that, but not, I don't know, maybe a little more relatable. I'm not sure. Maybe without the curtains. What do you think?
I think that sounds great. I would use that. I think that's the kind of stuff I'm always looking for too.
Yeah. So I wouldn't wear a matching outfit to match my table, but definitely I would love to give the readers ideas on how to entertain without spending $1 million, and how to do the whole package, right? The food, the cocktail, the table, and make it fun. I think that would be my next project.
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to be looking forward to that. Patty, I want to thank you for being on the program. We're going to put links to the Essential Cuban Cookbook on the bio information, as well as a link to the Mad Table. So if you're listening to this and you're curious about that, please go check those links out. I'll also include a link to Les Dames Escoffier. I'm probably mangling that again, but I'll put a link to that. If you're a young woman chef and you're interested in that, please go check that out as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dean. Thank you so much.
Patty, thank you for being on the program. That was my interview with Patty Morrell-Ruiz. She is the author of the Essential Cuban Cookbook. You can purchase that book through the link or at Better bookstores everywhere. You can also check out her website, The Mad Table, which is full of lots of great instructional videos, links, and great recipes there as well. We're going to be having on next week the wonderful Linda Shu, MD, who is a local author of the Spicebox Kitchen and of the same name, the website with recipes and guidance on healthy cooking. I had a really great time talking to Lynn, and I can't wait for you to hear that interview next week. If you listen to this website often, I always ask people to please share the website links with friends on social media. Always love to get new people interested in the podcast. We have links too if you want to contribute. Buy me a cup of coffee or a pint. I'm always very grateful. Also, we want to mention our sponsor, CH NorCal, whose information and link is on the bio as well. Also, we want to give very, very big hearty thanks to Asian Men Records, who's allowed us to use their song continually, Talk About Love, by the band Kitty Cat Fan Club. You can check out that band, and you could purchase their music through Asian Man Records. Also check out all the other bands they feature as well. Buy some of their LPs and also some of their merch. They're great hoodies, t-shirts, bumper stickers, etc. Please check out asianmenrecords.com. I want to thank you all for listening to this podcast. I really am so happy with all the great feedback I'm always getting from my listeners. I really am very just grateful for all of you being here through all the different episodes we've had recently. And thank you for all the feedback you've given. Hope you all have a really great week and stay out of this heat and keep on cooking.